So answering a question from Yakovlev Art on Instagram. I know this is something you asked me to do a while ago, but I don't think I'll have time to actually do like a full comprehensive one, so I'll just explain the process. So anyway, the question is, how do you make a YouTube video start to finish? And the answer is, it really depends, because everyone has a slightly different process. I've been doing YouTube for about 5 years now, just over 5. I think it was 5 in October. And there are a few things I always keep in mind. So first of all, editing effort. Now, whenever I want to do a video, I always run through a little checklist in my mind thinking about how much effort will it be to edit this video once it's recorded, depending on the way I do it. So if I'm doing an art piece, if I'm recording it live as I'm doing it, is that going to take more effort to edit than if I do a breakdown video talking about the art after the fact? So I guess you can think about that as like 2 different points in time. While you're making the artwork and after you've done the artwork, which of these is going to take more time to edit, which of these is going to be more entertaining for people to watch, and which of these will I enjoy doing more. And it's not necessarily a case that one of these is necessarily better for all of those questions than the other options. So if I look at a particular project, like an art piece or a product or something like that, I think about, okay, when in this story do I make the video? If it's something like a product, that's more obviously going to be after the fact. I'm not going to sit there and show people me making the product. A lot of the time it will be something very code-centric, which is extremely boring. You know, it'll end up being like a 20-hour video, which just doesn't make any sense. But after the fact, I'm like, okay, here's a list of all the features. Here's what you'll find useful. Go get it here, the end. So depending on the project, a breakdown may be more appropriate than something live. So I'll talk a bit more about like the actual nitty-gritty, the actual editing process. But before that, there's another thing to keep in mind. So scripting. When I started making videos on YouTube, every video was scripted because I was worried about missing out important information and then people having to correct me or me just forgetting to put certain things in. I got more confident over time, and now I don't script any videos. Now again, there may be some exceptions for that if there's something very, very important that which needs to be said correctly, but I've also found now that when I do improvised things, I do tend to talk about everything I want to talk about most of the time. Sometimes there are a few things which get missed out, but even then you can edit after the fact or maybe add extra information, you know, in like a pinned comment or something. The amount of time I save from improvising videos, just sitting down and talking about what I want to talk about rather than scripting them, is massive, because I was finding that if I wanted to script every video, I would procrastinate on the scripting process. And that was a major drag because it's kind of like, you know, submitting an essay for school. You leave it till the last moment, but if you don't have a deadline, the last moment never comes. So scripting was giving me so much frustration, and at the end of the day, I just realized, wait, I don't even need a script. So then I just got straight into it. So these are just like a few of the starter questions which I think about when going to make a video. For the actual recording process, again, there are different recording methods I use depending on what it is. So if I'm doing something for the main channel, which I want to be high quality, then I go for the high quality method, which takes slightly longer to prepare. So what I mean by that is, behind me, over in that workspace, I have the Sony ZV-E10 camera. Now that camera can be used in multiple ways. You can record directly on the actual camera, or you can feed the camera view in as like a webcam feed and then record it with OBS. The thing is, the OBS feed is lesser quality, and also there's a delay with the audio as well. So these are 2 different options of recording directly on the camera and recording through OBS. Now the OBS one is kind of faster to record videos because I can put that camera view in the corner and show the screen at the same time. And then on my Elgato Stream Deck, I've basically bound different buttons to different corners. So if I'm recording a video live using that low quality method, I can move my face to each of the corners, but then it's a little bit difficult to remember to reset the view afterwards, because sometimes I'll be working somewhere in Blender and then realize later that I'm zoomed into another corner of the screen. Now, I don't use that fast method much. That's more appropriate for second channel videos, but I have used it recently for an art breakdown. I also found that doing the fast method and the lower quality method produces file sizes which are smaller as well, but even then files can be crunched down afterwards with software like Handbrake. But if I'm doing a main channel video, I usually tend to do the high quality, slightly slower and heavier file size method. So I record the face footage on the actual camera. You grab the voice from my Rode Procaster microphone separately in Audacity, and then separately from that I get the screen recording at full resolution through OBS. So we are getting the most data from every department. We're getting the full quality camera, the full quality audio, and the full quality screen, rather than trying to merge them all into one OBS feed. So that's 2 methods, the full method and the quick method. The quick method also has a couple of annoyances. So if you forget to set your OBS like sound properties or devices, you might be recording the desktop audio at the same time as your microphone audio, and then if that's the case, you can't split them after the fact in the same way that you could if they were all separate files, because they're all one waveform. So if you make a mistake with that and you don't realize until later, then you can't really fix it, because you might have music going at the same time as your voice, and then, well, you just have to record it again. But eventually everything gets put into the editing workspace, and I use Adobe Premiere. Why don't I use DaVinci Resolve? Because I really don't like the interface. I know a lot of people feel very strongly about Resolve, but honestly, I really hate the interface. And something about the cache sizes as well when editing with that software is just unacceptable. And there's this weird thing as well where there was such bad performance on the free version, even just running a 1920 by 1080 file, that you had to disable the option for hardware acceleration to speed it up. But as far as I understood at that point in time, you couldn't even use hardware acceleration on the free version, but something about having that tick box ticked massively crunched and slowed down the software. I don't know if that's the case now, but there was like some really quirky stuff at the time. Premiere has a subdividable interface, which I really love. It's similar to Unity's interface and also kind of Blender's, but Blender you can't really undock things as easily. The thing I like about Premiere, I can literally just drag a section of an interface and put it on a different monitor, customize it, split it up however I like. So I like that customization, and the performance is actually really good for me as well. Depending on the recording method I use, levels may need to be balanced in different ways, but there is actually a step before this. For example, if I get my raw audio recording from my Procaster microphone, I tend to do a denoising pass in Audacity, in which case I take a section of me not speaking. So I select that section, then go to effects and then noise reduction, and then get the noise profile. And then I'll select the entire waveform, go back to the noise reduction effect, and then apply. So that will apply the profile of noise you got from the empty space, and then use it to remove noise through the entire recording, which works fine. Then I take a copy of that audio as either a WAV file or an MP3, and then I pass it through my processing setup, which I used to use Adobe Audition for, but then I cut down the number of Adobe products. So now I use FL Studio, which is maybe a bit of an unconventional choice for doing like voice recording processing, but it works really well. So I've got my set of VSTs that I use to turn it from something raw into something much more juicy, something that sounds good. When everything is put in Premiere, I line up the waveforms manually. You can do automatic alignment for audio, but it's so shockingly slow most of the time. It's just easier just to drag the video and the audio in and just go, whoop, there we go, and just visually line it up by eye, since you can see the waveforms. And then we begin what I call the trim pass. So I don't have the mental capacity to edit the entire video start to finish in order. That just sounds really boring because, you know, if you're showing your face on the screen at the same time as like Blender, for example, you're gonna have to crop it down and move it, but then sometimes you want to fade it in and out of a different size and then also cut out all the empty space and then show other things on the screen. So if you're doing that chronologically, it's a lot of moving between different micro tasks in the editing process. I found the thing which is so much easier for me is to do a trim pass first. So what I mean is once everything is aligned and all the files are linked, because you can link files, so if you like click on one video and you move it, it moves the audio as well. I do a pass that's entirely dedicated to cutting out empty space. I have actually tried to write a tool to do this in Premiere and it did kind of work, but the timings are still wrong, so I can't really use it until I go back and fix that project. But to help with this process, I have made a custom keymap for 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on the keyboard. So I never have to move my hand on the keyboard when editing. So 1 is to select, 2 is to cut, 3 is to delete, and then 4 is to ripple edit. 5 is to link and unlink, and then shift 3 is to ripple delete. So 3 is to delete regularly, and then if I hold shift and press 3, it does a ripple delete. So what it does is when you delete a clip, it will move everything that comes afterwards into its place. So I just sit there effectively doing this the whole time, and then moving the mouse around, clicking on different parts as we go. And I've gotten really, really quick at doing that, because after doing that dozens or hundreds of times, you build up an extreme muscle memory for doing that task quickly. So doing the trim pass doesn't take long, but what that means is you're cutting out one really annoying part of the editing process. Now when I go back through, I just need to put extra things on the screen or just copy paste different effects to like the main camera feed. But even that doesn't take too much effort. For example, if I'm cropping my face and scaling it into a corner of a screen, I'll just select all the video clips in one go and then apply that effect. And I have also created presets for those particular things as well, because you can do presets for effects in Premiere. So I'll select all the video clips, then grab my crop and motion / scale preset, and then drag that onto the video file so my face automatically goes from a full screen down into the corner. Although these presets now are a little bit out of date because they were made for 1920 by 1080 recordings, and I tend to do 2560 by 1440 recordings now. Depending on the videos, for example, this will be a 1920 by 1080 one, this discussion, because the camera's recording in that, and there's no need to up the resolution because I'm not going to be showing a screen on this video. So that's another thing as well. If the main thing I'm showing on a video is a screen at a certain resolution, like with a main channel video, if the camera is recording in 1080, I will scale up my face to match the resolution of Blender, for example, when I'm doing the editing. So even if that pixel information isn't there, I will scale up my face just to make it make sense on the video. I tended to do most of my videos at 60 frames a second, but now the internet has become a bit of a struggle in this temporary rental accommodation. 30 frames is also good, but again, it depends on the video. So if I'm doing an important main channel one and I really want to squeeze out the sense of quality for the video, I'll leave it on 60. If it's less important, I'll move it to 30 so that when I crunch down the video size, it gets really small for an upload. Once I'm done editing the entire video, I'll do a final processing pass. And what I mean by that is for a microphone like this, where it's picking up a lot of information, I will unlink every clip in the sequence, then select all the audio clips where I'm speaking, and then put a declicker effect onto that audio. The thing about Premiere, though, is that takes up a lot of temporary memory, so you don't really want to watch the sequence back with the declicker pass active on the voice clips, because if you check your RAM in the task manager, it'll go up to like 12, 14, 15 gigabytes of RAM, and then there will start being issues. So that declicker processing is something I put on the files or on the clips when I'm done and when I've proof watched everything back. And then after they've been applied, I will just render it out to a video immediately. And then it will calculate all those declicker effects and then render out the video and combine it all together into one final file. And then you have your video file. You can upload it directly or crunch it down to make more space. So that's where Handbrake comes in handy if you want to kind of optimize your storage space. Then for the thumbnails, I keep every thumbnail I make, and I have done for a few years, although the folder's getting quite big now. But sometimes, and more recently I've been doing this, I do speculative thumbnails where before I even make a video, I will play around with making a thumbnail to see if I can get a feeling for what one would look like a good one would look like, but I don't always do that. Sometimes I leave it to the last minute. Not always a good thing to do because presentation is half the effect. Makes a big difference on getting people to click on a video. But I don't think you should necessarily always try and optimize for that. It's a little bit jarring and people can tell when you're trying to manipulate the space. But you kind of get into a rhythm of what people expect with the thumbnails as well. And for a particular series of videos, it's nice to keep some consistency, which does help as well when people look at the channel page, because people that see content want a predictable service, should we say, which is something I'm not great at, because I like to kind of jump all around the place. But for people that want to integrate your channel into their lifestyle, where they just, they sit down and they watch you every day, they want to see predictability so that there are no nasty surprises that appear in their subfeed. Also, for the pacing of the video, you will get a feel for how long people want to watch for. When I watch my videos back, because I get bored quite easily, I can feel when I'm losing attention, paying attention to myself. I used to do little things for fun, like throw my face around the screen, and that did help, but I do oftentimes as well cut out segments of me speaking if I feel like that segment is particularly redundant. For example, if I've mentioned similar information in the video already and I don't necessarily need to do that, because that's the thing, when you mention something to someone, their mind doesn't necessarily focus on the particular thing you said, and sometimes it wanders to other areas naturally. So you don't need to cover all of those areas if you don't want to. So sometimes it is nice optimizing and cutting out unnecessary bits of speaking just for the sake of making something easier to watch. Now there will be unique challenges and unique differences for everything I've spoken about, depending on the type of video you're making and for what purpose it's being made for. But in general, everyone has their own process, and I encourage you when you're doing things to try slightly different techniques, even on the microscopic scale, should we say. So again, if you find that your hand is moving too far when you're actually doing the editing process, try what I did, experiment with making a custom hotkey map, should we say, so you don't have to move as far, just tiny things like that. Sometimes it's easy not to change the process and just grind on what we already know, but I think it's a smart idea just to experiment with slightly different, very small variations on the technique, just to see if you can nudge yourself into like a more effective direction when actually making the content. So there's a lot more I could say about that, but I think I'll leave it there just as a kind of starter. If there's anyone watching that has a question they'd like me to answer in a video, then let me know. I may also siphon the audio from this and throw it up on the podcast as well. For more information on my work, you can go to curtisholt.online. You can follow me on social media pretty much everywhere with @CurtisJamesHolt. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.